Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Refold podcast. My name is Clayton, also known as George Pig, and I manage the community here at Refold. Today, we have a very special guest, Mark Kaufmann, the CEO of LingQ and the son of the famous polyglot Steve Kaufmann. He's also a former professional hockey player, and join us today as we talk all about LingQ and language learning. All right. So, Mark, it is great to have you with us today. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, who you are, what your relationship to the language learning community is?
Sure. My name is Mark Kaufmann. I am the CEO of LingQ. I think a lot of you will know my dad, Steve. He's more the face of LingQ, and I'm kind of the guy, I guess, in the background trying to make things happen with the app. And I guess we've been at it for quite a few years now. Initially just teaching English, and since 2008 with LingQ. And I mean, I think that's insofar as my connection to the language learning community, that is those are the highlights.
LingQ has been around for a long time, 2008.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if you've ever heard the sort of founding story or how we kind of got into
I have
doing
not,
this at
but I would love
all.
to. That was one of the questions that got asked was how did LingQ get started? And was it your ideas or was it your dad's?
Yeah. I mean, this was a long time ago now, around probably 2000, 2001. My dad was teaching, or not teaching, but learning Cantonese in Vancouver, and he was listening to the local Chinese radio station and heard about this the recent immigrant from China who had arrived here and had his life savings in his luggage, and had at least his life savings stolen out of his luggage. And I guess it's quite common for immigrants from China to travel with large amounts of cash in their luggage, so people prey on them out at the airport. At any rate, he heard about this guy who was a graduate from their top sort of technical university, and thought, well, you know what, maybe we can hire this guy. We had a company making software for the forest industry at the time, so we thought, well, maybe here's an opportunity. We'll hire this guy, give him a chance to get some local experience and get his, I guess, feet on the ground, and hopefully offset the loss of the cash. And at the same time, if he turns out to be useful, then maybe we can use him. So managed to get a hold of the guy through the radio station. And then, as it turned out, as we started working with the guy, we quickly realized that we couldn't understand him and he couldn't understand us, even though he had aced his TOEFL and was supposed to be a fully qualified white collar immigrant called. And so then we thought, well, there must be lots of guys like this here. There's an opportunity. And my dad, who'd always had an interest in languages and spoke 9 languages at the time, was learning Cantonese as his 10th. I had a pretty good sense of how to successfully learn languages, and thought, why don't we try to develop a system initially to help this guy, because we did have tech people, and so built like a simple prototype for him, and with the intention of going after the local immigrant market. But in the end, that really wasn't that good a business model, but it kind of got us started in the language teaching space. And from there, it evolved to a web version, and over time, web version only teaching English. And then, as I said, in 2008, into LingQ, which was obviously multi-language, in teaching multi-language. and we kind of just have gone on from there. And if you had told us at the time, 20 years later, we'd still be out, I don't know if we would have believed you. And I think a lot of people would have given up at many stages along the way, but here we are today. And yeah, I mean, stronger and bigger and growing, you know, yeah, enjoying it. And it's amazing kind of what twists and turns lead to what.
That is the origin story behind LingQ. I had no clue. So I would have been just starting high school back in like 2006 or so. And yeah, I was vaguely aware of an early version of LingQ called The Linguist. It had sort of a green logo with like a chat bubble. And then it eventually evolved into LingQ. And speaking of growing, it really is growing. I have noticed that you guys have had a couple of really cool updates in the past year, and particularly in the past couple of months. So you guys had a sort of an out-of-date user interface, sort of user experience for a while. And you guys recently released LingQ 5.0, which updated it. It gave it a very sort of modern Netflix-like experience to browsing LingQ and to using LingQ. And in addition to that, you guys have also been on a language adding spree. You recently added Swahili, your first African language. You added Afrikaans and Georgian just the past week or two. And that has been amazing. You know, I'm glad to see LingQ continuing to expand, and in no small part due to the community behind it. What does it take to really get a language added to LingQ?
Yeah, I mean, the additional languages, a lot of it is, not a lot of it, almost all of it is driven by the community. Anytime you see a language added, that means that one or more members of our community who are behind it and are obviously motivated and have generated, if you off the top of my head, I think it's 60 mini stories. I think there's some requirement for intermediate content, and then a grammar guide. I think with that in place, we'll launch the language, and then it starts to fill from there. I could have missed a requirement, but it's more or less that. And yeah, typically it's one or two motivated members of the community who a lot of the time would like to see their own language added, or obviously maybe motivated to learn that language, and for which there aren't many other resources. And one of the things about LingQ is that it's, as long as there are online dictionaries, it's really not that hard for us to add languages. In fact, there are a few things that have to be set up, but we've kind of streamlined the process now to where it's relatively quick. But we don't add all languages because there needs to be a minimum level of content fundamentally there. Otherwise, new users don't understand that it's a, whatever you want to call it, beta version, or it's only there so that people can build it up. If they sign up to learn Swahili, for example, and there's only 3 lessons, they just think LingQ's no good. So that's why we have that requirement. We need a minimum level so that new users who come on to specifically learn that language have enough there where it feels like there's a product there.
Right. So that sort of brings me to my next question, and one that the community has had for a while is, would you guys ever consider lowering the requirements for long-term users for like an alpha? So essentially, at the end of the day, like you said, LingQ can support anything that has an online dictionary. And some users have wondered why there is not sort of like an alpha version. And I think you just answered it, basically, because new people coming on do not understand what LingQ is and how it functions unless there's a minimum product, the 60 mini stories, the grammar guide.
Yeah, like in the past, obviously that's something that it seems like that should be easy to do. Why don't we just add all languages and kind of let them fill up over time? But we actually did do that once or twice in the past. I can't remember for which languages, and so we had some relatively empty languages. And then you just get the emails like, oh, this is whatever. People get mad at us. I'm like, well, we're just trying to help the community. Like, the reality is that those, the most of the vast majority of our users study sort of the top 8 languages. So once we're into these other languages, we like languages. We want to support language learners. We get these requests. We want to support our community, but we don't want people mad at us because we're just, fundamentally, yeah, the economic benefit to adding those languages really isn't there. But so to then get a bunch of grief and support tickets sent our way that's why we introduced the requirements. We're like, okay, we don't mind doing it, but there needs to be a minimum level, because the reality is most people who sign up for them don't know that the community generated the content, don't know that how LingQ works, don't understand that you can import, don't understand that it will fill it up over time. They just signed up to learn the language and they can't, and they're mad at us. So we
Yeah, a lot of people just don't understand LingQ, I think is what it comes down to.
for
And
sure.
I know that there's been a couple of attempts to like have a sort of tutorial built in. There's like the getting started 8-part series, where they explain how to use LingQ, the creation of links. I actually got frustrated so we've got clients at Refold, and I get a lot of them on LingQ. I'm like, hey, it's a one-stop shop for immersion learning. And I wrote my own tutorial on how to use LingQ because definitely people just don't understand it. And it's sort of hard to get people to understand how LingQ works, what it does, and what you use it for. So
that is a perpetual problem for us ever since we started in 2002 with the linguist. How do you explain to the uninitiated what you're supposed to do? Because it's actually pretty simple. It doesn't feel like it's enough. We watch people, there's tools you can use to, or you can pay people to go through your app and record. Like, we can record people going through the app and they make comments, and obviously they don't know anything about LingQ, about the approach. They don't know who's Steve, for instance. They obviously don't know about whatever comprehensible input. They're just I want to learn a language. Maybe at some level they want to learn. They come on. They've obviously had exposure at school. They've tried Duolingo or one of the other popular language apps. So their expectations have been set to kind of expect something like that. And so when they get on LingQ and it's just text with audio, you can click on words, you can just see them like, okay, yeah, but what do I do? It doesn't feel like it's enough. Like, no, you just have to read and listen and look up words. That's it. Just do that and believe,
that totally mirrors us here at Refold. People come into language learning from sort of a traditional background or app-based background. They want something active. They're like, what do you mean you just listen and read and look up words? And I'm like, that's it. That's the core of the Refold method. That's the core of LingQ. You listen, you read, and you look up words. And I've noticed for a lot of people, they want something that feels like active studying. They want flashcards. Right. They want grammar exercises, because that's what they've done prior to this. That's what they did in school. That's what they did with Duolingo. And that totally mirrors our experience at Refold, getting people onto sort of the input method. And not surprised that LingQ has had the same sort of experience.
And as you sort of said, like, we've tried different things, and we've been trying different things for 20 years. And it almost doesn't matter what we do. There are those people who understand, and there are those people who don't. And it's just very hard to kind of bridge that gap, we try to get Steve's videos in front of them, because obviously the more exposure they've had to Steve, who talks about how you learn, the more likely they are to have the patience and do what we ask them to do. But that's the nut that, if we could ever crack it, obviously significantly would expand our ability to retain users. I mean, I think for a lot of people, as you said, it just doesn't feel like enough. Like, oh, but I want to, ask me a question. No, we don't ask questions. So we do different things. We try to congratulate people at different points, just to kind of simulate a little bit of the experience at Duolingo, where 30 seconds.
I love it. I love
that?
it. There's a reason. I love it. There's a reason why I pay for LingQ. I could, at the end of the day, if I wanted to, use a free software like Caliber, and get a dictionary, and
Right.
sort of jerry rig it to have a pop-up dictionary. But I enjoy earning points, having streaks. I like the leaderboard. I like comparing. I'm the #1 Filipino learner. I think I'm probably one of the only ones on the server, or sorry, on the app. But I've got like 11,000 words, and I just like to look and say, like, yeah, I've got the most known words in Filipino on LingQ, and that does something for me. It's my monkey brain number go up, so I enjoy it. I like being told, oh, hey, you're now beginner 1 in Dutch, and I'm like, yes, I am. Thank you.
I'm the same way, and we do get people who say, oh, I don't need that stuff. It's annoying. Turn it off. And I'm like, okay, but most people using LingQ are learning on their own. So it's not that easy to stay motivated the whole time when you're by yourself and you're not in that country, where the language is spoken. And so we've kind of taken the position that anything we can do to help motivate you, when you're fired up, no problem. You're going to go spend the time. You got a good piece of content. But when you kind of lapse a little bit, and when you finish one piece of content and you're kind of looking for another, the fact that you have a streak to maintain, or that you're almost at, intermediate 2 or whatever, like those things do help keep you going. And so much of success in language learning is just keeping going and spending the time and continuing to do it every day. I can't remember who I was talking with the other day, but the idea that 20 minutes a day is far more effective than 3 hours one day and 2 weeks of inaction. It's like that continuous activity that gets you there. So yeah, I'm glad to hear that you like all that stuff. It's obviously we get different comments from different people in the community all the time, but as I said, our philosophy is the more different ways we can motivate people, every little bit kind of helps people stay there. And maybe some stuff helps some types of members and other stuff helps other types of members, but the streak, or even improving the content that's available, or the coins, or whatever it is, anything we can do there is typically tended to show improved results in terms of usage.
Coins is interesting. All of these apps try to introduce coins, but then there used to be the avatar system in LingQ up until 5.0. But as far as I know, other than restoring a damaged streak, there's not much you can do with coins in LingQ. And Duolingo suffers from this as well, where like they've got a currency system, but nothing to buy with it.
Yeah, it's and we do get that. What can I do with coins? And we have the additional sort of complication that we have points which you can use for conversations, to pay tutors for conversations, and there is the odd piece of content that's for sale that you can use points to buy. But yeah, coins. The only thing you can do with your coins is repair your streak. At the moment, we're trying to think of things to do with the coins. It's not that easy, but it would be nice, because if you're a serious user, you do build up a lot of coins. I mean, I guess we use it obviously as a metric to reflect your activity and in rankings and so forth. But yeah, the with the avatar, at least you could spend your coins and build up your avatar background. I don't know if you did that, but
I did not super
okay,
into it myself, and
yeah.
the old Link avatars were these little, I don't know, fuzzy creatures, kind of just not my thing. Um,
Yeah,
but
part of the problem was it wasn't a great looking avatar, and then the way it was done, it was just very labor intensive. So that was part of why we said, you know what, we don't actually think it gets used that much, and to redo it this way, it's just not worth it. So we just phased them out.
well, rest in peace, Link avatar.
Yeah.
Um, so one thing I have to say about the Link community is it seems kind of fractured. So Link has the forums, then there's the Link Slack for like community contributors, librarians, and then there's the quote unquote official Discord server. And sometimes I feel like these three parts of the community don't always interact.
Hmm.
So Refold operates pretty much entirely on Discord.
Uh-huh.
And the Link Discord is run by volunteers who are not always in contact um, with the Link staff as directly as they could be. And then the forums just attract a different type of user. You know, so I've noticed that people who are like millennials, people who are 30, people who are like 35, tend to not be as active on the forums as some of the older users on Link. And then I personally am only on Slack for Link. I check it like once a week. I talk to some of the other librarians, and that's it for me. I don't use Slack at all because I use Discord for work. Um, and I think that sometimes there's just a lot of stuff that the community would love to do that they can't because the connections aren't being made. Um, it kind of feels like the Link community is split across these platforms and
Hmm.
fractured, and it's like the left hand doesn't talk to the right.
Right. Yeah, that's probably fair. I have to admit that I don't have almost never been to the Discord channel. Eric on our team set that up. Yeah, the obviously I'm in Slack all the time, so I check on the librarian Slack channel, and then in our forum, that's where at least if I'm going to interact, I tend to interact in those two places. I agree. It would be better if everybody were in one place. I mean, we have a lot of motivated users and users who use Link a lot. So
Power
everybody
users.
ideas about how things that they would like to see, and some of them are specific to those users, so unlikely to get done. But there are lots of things that the committed users see, and both in terms of things that need to be fixed, but also in terms of things that we could do to improve the product, and anything we can do to sort of improve our lines of communication is worth doing. And that's why we end up with a Discord channel in addition to the forum, which in hindsight, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. Maybe we should be forcing people to interact on the forum just so that we don't end up in this situation that you're describing, where we kind of have, it's very hard to spread your attention across all these different channels. It's a bit like, most people can only focus on one or two social media channels. Otherwise you spend your whole day there. And it's the same with us. If we're, individual members on the team are going to be interacting, it's hard to be in all these places at once. So I don't know what the solution is. We are reworking our forum right now because it's kind of has always been clunky and and slow. So we're using a third-party tool and hoping that we can bring more of our communication sort of into the same space.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that one of the most recent updates to the Android app has finally added the forums to the app. Because for a while the forum kind of felt like it had its head chopped off and it was just over here. The body of LingQ was over here, and you could basically you had to go to the website to interact on the forum, and now you can do it through the app, which is fantastic. Because I have a tablet, and that's where I do most of my linking. I link in bed, and it makes it more convenient for me now that the forum is sort of attached to the app.
Yeah, and I was that it took that long. It probably isn't great, but you're just always competing like with demands on what to add next, because the Android app has always lagged the iOS app and has been always trying to catch up. And I too am glad that we got the forum on Android finally, and also actually hope if you use your Android tablet, hopefully you've noticed some improvements there in terms of how it performs on the Android tablet, because I know they spent some time recently as well.
There was a bug that broke it for me for a few weeks. Recent languages did not have their dictionaries on Android.
Oh, okay.
So
hopefully you reported that right away.
I reported it on the Slack, and it got answered right away.
Okay.
So that's one of the perks of having instant communication like the Slack. But I do have to say, I'm a power user of LingQ. I use it often. A lot of people are probably more casual, and I do love LingQ and all the good and the bad. I think that it's a great app, and that's why I recommend it to so many people.
Well, we appreciate that for sure. I think, we recognize that we can be better, and we try to be, but at the same time, we're
your guys' support staff are great. I have nothing but good things. I even call out Zoran in my tutorial, like, hey, if you ever have a problem, Zoran will get back to you. I think that it's good. Again, it's the issue of the fact that you have to go to 2 or 3 different places, I think, to communicate with people.
It's interesting you say that, and I will. Yeah, we're trying to, at least, as I said, do more things. We're introducing. We will, in the next probably week, there will be a new forum, which is going to be
I'll be honest, the only thing I check on the forum are your updates. You post updates about LingQ, and I'm like, okay, they added this language, they fixed this bug. So I'm definitely not a forum person myself. I interact with a lot of other librarians on the Discord, but then the Discord does not have a lot of official LingQ interaction. Eric might check it once a week or something. And Constantine tried to get on Discord, but I think he's more of a Slack user.
Slack tends to be an internal tool for us, and then we have a few channels. Well, the librarian channel, really.
The librarian channel. So
yeah. Anyway, it's good to know that. It's something to think about for us as we continue to evolve things.
So, what do you think you mentioned wanting to change? What are some changes that you would like to see? And these are just hypotheticals, not saying they have to happen or that they're gonna happen for listeners. Just in an ideal world, if you had unlimited resources and time, what would you like to see added to LingQ? Because you guys have made so many cool changes recently. The 5.0 update, very sleek and modern. Whisper integration, where you can now upload audio and it will transcribe it for you. And you can, it sort of saves the hassle of having to get transcriptions for podcasts. A lot of cool stuff. What would you like to see added?
I think the two big, let's say 3 sort of big things, big issues, big targets for improvement, call it, that I would think of are: 1, the perpetual problem of helping new users get started, particularly those who don't understand what they're supposed to do at LingQ. So that's improving onboarding, looking at how we present the information. So that's sort of like a perpetual project for us, but we're trying to spend a bit more time on it now. Secondly, we have this tutor section on the web, which I'm not sure how many people are aware of, but we do, where we have tutors that you can speak to, and we also have that's the writing exchange. Those don't exist on mobile, so figuring out how to get those onto the mobile apps, and at the same time, we've introduced this certified tutor program where we certify tutors as almost LingQ coaches, so that those people who come on and want to use LingQ but aren't sure how to get started can speak to someone a person who can guide them and help them understand what it is they're supposed to do or they should be doing to get the most out of LingQ. And I think, as far if we have the tutor section, which is underused, we don't really think we need to compete with the italkis of this world. But at the same time, we think there is value in people speaking with tutors that understand LingQ and benefits of, that come from the report that you're going to get and being able to import it. So just trying to introduce more of that to help those people who are open, who are looking for some hand-holding to get that. And then the last thing is that there are, other opportunities with this new technology, the AI, the GPT type technology. And so looking at doing different things like the Whisper integration was the first thing. Once that's in place, what can we do with podcasts in general, which are a massive source of interesting content? And the biggest, I spoke about the beginners and trying to help them get started, but the other big group are the guys that get it. How do we keep them going? How do we make it easier and easier for people to find the content that they want to learn from? And not only find it, but access it easily so that you don't have to jump through hoops to kind of whatever. Like over the years, our motivated users are doing all kinds of things. I mean, whatever, ripping files and figuring out how to remove DRM or generate transcripts or
you mentioned
whatever
the
it is.
DRM.
What's that?
You mentioned the DRM, and that's one of the biggest barriers I have found. So Refold does have coaching. We have one-on-one coaching where we sort of train people to use the input method, sort of like Steve, to learn languages. And for a lot of people, LingQ is just good. People who don't want to have 10 different tools and people who don't want to, a lot of times the language learning tools are kind of janky. I say that with all the love in my heart. LingQ is a clean sort of commercial product. It's all in one. You can do your listening, you can do your reading, you can even do your watching in LingQ. And one thing I have found sort of a barrier, and I get around this personally, I import mostly web fiction. So these are novels originally published on the web, and they do not have DRM. Right. That's sort of my go-to. But a lot of people, they like they're not into the amateur fiction scene. They want their Stephen Kings, they want their J.K. Rowling. And they buy these books and they bring them to me and they're like, it's DRM'd. And we have to teach people to de-DRM stuff. And oftentimes Amazon DRM is harder to get around, for better or worse. So we have to recommend, look, go to Kobo or go get your books here because the DRM is easier to get around. And it's a little bit unfortunate. So I definitely think that what I have seen getting people set up on LingQ is the DRM is a huge barrier for just normal people who are not techie.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that to be the case. And, anytime, if whatever you have to do requires one extra step, you already discourage people. If it requires 20 extra steps and researching on Google and downloading tools while trying not to get, malware installed on your computer, the number of people that are going to drop off is, obviously very high. So yeah, it's books are the toughest in a way because there are lots of hoops to jump through in order to be able to sell books. but that is would be great. I would love to be able to find books, the popular, whatever, fiction, nonfiction, bestsellers, easily, audio with text, so that, what you said, LingQ doesn't do it. It's not that fancy, but it's convenient. And in fact, that's what we're selling. We're selling convenience. Like, you can read and listen, you can look words up, but the way we kind of pull it all together, it's on, multiple, different, mobile and web, and we track everything that you do. And there's once you get into it, it's just, you're paying a little bit a month for this convenience, and the efficiency that brings. So you're not spending all this extra time doing all this stuff. You're spending your time learning language. So the same is true for books. If we could conveniently provide them. And I guess with this Whisper integration, at least with podcasts, there's so much stuff out there. If we can integrate some kind of tool where you can find podcasts and subscribe on LingQ, and then this content just appears for you, that just saves you time and gives you this easy access to that type of content. And yeah, as far as books go, if we could figure out how to provide books inside of LingQ, I think a lot of people would find that pretty appealing.
So with the podcasts, you currently have something that's sort of like, I don't know if it's an RSS feed under the hood, I think it is, where you can pull in news, and then you can import news articles daily. I imagine podcasts also have RSS feeds where you can. So I guess in the future, whenever your tech guys get to it, there might be a way to do that in the future for LingQ, where you can just pull in a podcast episode and have Whisper transcribe it.
I mean, yeah, I don't want to tip our hand, but yeah, I think that's definitely something that we're looking at. A lot of the elements are in place already, and it's a matter of designing it in such a way that it fits into the interface, and figuring out what would actually need to happen. But I think a lot of people would find that pretty useful, and
it'd be very cool
functionality. Yeah.
You guys sell lessons. I've personally never bought one, but I do know that you guys sell lessons. Have you guys looked into potentially hooking up with publishers and then just directly selling ebooks through LingQ?
We have, over the years, explored doing some of that, and that's partially why we're actually trying to invest some time now in at least selling some content. You're not alone in never having bought content on LingQ. The vast, like the overwhelmingly people use the free stuff or import. But so the question is it because the content that we're selling now isn't attractive enough, or that there's not enough of it, or that no matter what we have there, people are still going to use the free stuff? That's what we're trying to find out. Insofar as working with publishers goes, anything's possible. The downside seems to me is, at least us, when we look at it, is that if you work directly with publishers, you need agreements in sort of every market, and it just gets kind of overwhelming in a way. So we would like to offer that, honestly. And so I think there's probably a way. I think we just gotta kind of keep going through the steps that we're going through now. And one of the things that issues is if that the reality is that it's a small number of users who use that kind of content. Most users are kind of beginner, intermediate. And so like if everybody were interested in books, it would be more of an obvious win. But a lot of the efforts that we make in terms of finding and providing higher level content can't be justified just because the numbers the numbers are so much smaller there. If you think of a bell curve, the meat is actually more towards the front. But because most of us on the inside are learners and tend to be more intermediate advanced, we want that functionality. So that also impacts the things that we do.
Yeah. And I've seen this with the Refold community as well. There's I don't want to call it a disconnect, but there's a difference between what power users and what advanced users want, and then what is useful for the vast majority of people who tend to be beginner to lower intermediate. So
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's always the case, I guess.
I will say there is some content that I think people are interested in that is being sold. Everyone that I have, all of my clients, my personal coaching clients, I've recommended the Ollie Richards stuff to, have loved it. I just don't think they buy it through LingQ. I think they buy it on Amazon or they buy it elsewhere and then they import it to LingQ. And I know that you guys do sell it on LingQ. And I think I've read his short stories in 3 or 4 different languages. I think I've done Spanish, Portuguese, German, and maybe Dutch. And I'm a big fan. I think they're great little stories. Many stories are great. They're kind of boring. Ollie Richards' stories tend to be a little bit more engaging.
Right.
And I definitely have a couple of clients who have bought his stuff, but they're just not buying it through LingQ, is what it comes down to.
Which, and I think his stuff that they're buying on Amazon, we don't have on LingQ because I think he's got an exclusivity deal with them. So we have other content of his on LingQ. And as long as, I think that if they can buy it and import it in LingQ, that's great. It would be nice if somewhere along the line we could do a deal with him where, if they buy it over there, we can have it on LingQ and vice versa. But all of those things, there's just a lot of sort of details, and it's hard to do. But yeah, I mean, I know that we have one of his stories, at least one in Spanish, and I know I did that one, and it doesn't surprise me that people buy his stuff, and hopefully they import it in LingQ, and I think the combination is very powerful.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to shift gears here. You personally, people do not know this. You used to be a professional hockey player. So you kind of answered this at the start, how you went, but I guess your father was involved in like timber, lumber, stuff like that. And that's how you got started in LingQ. So one of the questions I had from the community was, how did Mark Kaufmann go from being a pro Japanese hockey player to running a language learning company? And I think you already answered it. I just wanted to mention it. I think that that's cool. And how did that happen? You kind of you hinted towards it, but that just seems like a very interesting journey. You played professional ice hockey in Japan, and now you run a language learning company.
Yeah, and I guess what's more, like I played professional hockey in Italy, Austria, Switzerland, and Japan. So and worth mentioning that growing up, really didn't have any interest in learning languages, if I'm being honest. Here in Canada, we all have to take French, and I did well in French class, but I really didn't speak French. And it was only when I started traveling and playing hockey, starting in Italy, that the motivation all of a sudden became real. I can still remember being in Italy, and I didn't know any Italian, because it kind of happened very quickly. I thought I would be playing in North America, and then had this opportunity there, and then a few days later I was there. And you arrive somewhere and you don't know one word is interesting experience. And what struck me initially was that, at least in this town that I was in Italy, nobody spoke any English. But the little bit of French that I could muster, at least some people they could understand what I was saying. So at any rate, that was motivating. And so immediately I'm trying to figure out I start learning some Italian. And at that time you're getting cassettes and books and then I was in Austria and Switzerland. And so there again, you want to be able to speak to people. You want to be able to understand what your teammates are saying. That motivation to communicate is obviously a very powerful one. And so there again, started trying to learn German. And then the same story when I was in Japan. And I guess every summer I would come home and so I would work. We had as you say, we had still a lumber trading company. We make software for the forest industry. So I would come back and I would work in either one of those areas. And it was during that time when my dad had that experience with the Chinese guy. And so that kind of is how it started. And then shortly thereafter, I stopped playing in Japan and moved back here permanently. And so then, yeah, we said, well, we think there's potential here to make this into a business. It has ended up taking us quite a long time to do that, but it has the advantage of the perpetual challenge, and which is enjoyable. That every day you wake up, you don't know what's coming at you. You are trying to improve this, and now you're trying to work on that, and it's quite a bit different than whatever it is. Churning out the same product every day, like it's just not like that. It's like if you're building a house, it's the house that's never built. You're just constantly building and then rebuilding and adjusting and changing directions, and new technology comes along, and all of those things.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And then obviously Link is so international. The customers, the users are very international as well. I've noticed it with Refold. We officially offer like support in English and Spanish. And my Spanish is it's okay. It's like our internal vocab test puts me about 5,000 limitized words. Link has me about 5 times that, 6 times that.
Okay.
Because there's a sort of a gap between Link not being limitized and a limitized thing.
Yeah.
But I'm from the South of the US.
Right.
We're very polite. We're very indirect. And I interact with German people. I interact with Dutch people, interact with Spanish-speaking people in Spanish. And we're very polite in the South. We're very, very polite.
Right.
Yes, sir. No, ma'am. And I've noticed just the challenges of being very international. I've noticed that Spanish-speaking customers tend to submit multiple tickets for the same issue. I've noticed that sometimes people from, say, Germany or the Netherlands are a little bit direct. They're very straight to the point. Whereas a Southern person, I beat around the bush. And I'm sure there are some unique challenges to running an international company like Link. And a lot of your staff are international. When I think of Zoran, I believe he's Serbian.
Yeah.
And I think you might also have like a Ukrainian or a Russian or two on staff.
I mean, we have people all over the place. We have quite a few Ukrainians on our development team as well, and
I think
people everywhere. Honestly.
Someone I interact with, I can't think of her name. Is it Sarah?
Sarah is in Iran.
She's Iran, yeah. And very international team.
Very international team, and I guess maybe because I've lived in a bunch of places, I guess we've been doing it so long, I don't really treat anybody any differently, and don't worry about it when people are more direct than others. But there's no question that if you're generalizing, if you look at the way, like, as you say, Germans or Dutch people are on the forum or when they're writing support, in terms of being demanding and direct and very focused on specific details, and other people, it comes to mind the Japanese people are very indirect and
Incredibly indirect,
polite, and that's just how people are. People are, that's the cultures are different everywhere, and yeah, I think in the end we just try to respond, the same way to everybody, and try to be polite, and you just, the more, like anything with exposure, you realize that's just how it is there. That's how people are there. They're not being mean to us. They're or this message, which seems to be not that bad. Actually, the guy's kind of mad. Let's make sure we look out for that.
I worked at an eikaiwa for several years, teaching Japanese people English, and an eikaiwa, so an English conversation school.
Yeah.
And Japanese people will be seething, and they'll actually be very polite about it, and it takes time, the intercultural communication to, it's sort of like when a Southern woman says, "Bless your heart," she's really actually angry at you, sort of trope, and yeah, I think you guys do a good job.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, I still fundamentally feel people are the same. It doesn't matter where they come from. They think similar things in similar situations. How they choose to express it or how they express it culturally, you kind of have to read between the lines a bit. But
at have two things: they have a language and they have a culture. Right. And one thing I have seen is sometimes as English speakers, we conflate language and culture, but it's different. Somebody from Ontario is going to be different than somebody from South Africa, or somebody from Singapore, or somebody from the south of the United States, despite the fact that we might all share English.
No question. It definitely, there's language.
A Quebecer is different than a French person from France. So
exactly. No question that massive differences.
We're almost at time, but before we go, I did want to ask, so a little bit of background on you. Your family is actually also multilingual historically, right? You've got some, I think, Spanish sort of heritage, as well as maybe Chinese heritage. Do you have any plans on learning any of those heritage languages? It sounds like you've done some Spanish.
Yeah, I mean, my dad, obviously, his parents were German speaking, but he grew up. Well, he was born in Sweden, spoke Swedish till he was 5, but then moved to Montreal and then spoke English thereafter.
Was he like the West Island, sort of like in the English speaking part of Montreal?
He was I don't know that much about Montreal, but he was he was in the English speaking part. He said he never spoke French and never really ran into French people at that time. I think it was quite a bit different. But then growing up in Vancouver, so he spoke English. My mom grew up in Macau speaking Cantonese. Her mom was from Costa Rica, but they spoke Cantonese pretty much all the time at home. But then my parents would speak Cantonese to each other when they didn't want my brother and I to understand what they were saying, but otherwise we spoke English at home and really wasn't multilingual at all. Other than that, which I guess then it kind of is, but certainly my brother and I never spoke Cantonese. I can understand some, by over time you pick up on what's being said. But in terms of that being motivation of languages, it never has been, at least for me, the motivation to learn sort of heritage language. I learned some German because I was in Austria and Switzerland. I've studied some Spanish just because I was going to Mexico, and I just find it's more enjoyable when you go somewhere when you can understand the people there somewhat. So I've never, well, I guess I was in China when I was like 3, but I haven't been to China, and I don't have any immediate plans to go there. So that would for me be motivation to learn Chinese. So maybe, I mean, I would like to go at some point. So maybe when I know that's on the horizon, I might start learning Chinese. But I guess the fact that they're heritage languages, that isn't, for me, that's not a motivator. I know it is for many people, but for me, it's more sort of the likelihood that I'm going to be somewhere and have the opportunity to speak. For instance, I was in Sweden recently, so I spent a bit of time on my Swedish because I lived there for a couple months when I was at 17, so I had some Swedish already, and it's motivating. You're going somewhere like, okay, let's spend a bit of time on Swedish and see if we can't at least understand some of what people are saying when we're there.
Yeah, I think it is motivating. My two strongest languages, Filipino and Spanish. I credit that because I have passing interests in all languages. But in order for me to get to a high level, I have to be in contact with the language, like beyond LingQ, beyond YouTube. It involves travel, having friends, having relationships. And I totally understand. I think that's a big motivating factor for a lot of people is the language is real. It doesn't exist just on LingQ. It's not just text. There's people speaking it in the street, at home. And yeah, I don't think you're alone there. I think a lot of people find it highly motivating.
There's no question. I think, LingQ gives you that basis, the foundation, like under comprehension is, 80% of it, but that 20%, you got to be there. You got to speak, you got to interact, you got to have friends. Like if you really want to become a high level speaker, I think it's very hard to do it without having that exposure. You can do it. You can find someone to speak to where you are, or even online. If you can do a lot of online tutoring, for sure, but it's very hard to simulate that being immersed in everybody speaking that language, and you have to speak that language with everybody all the time. Like that's not that easy to recreate. But with the basis, with the foundation that you get, if you spend a lot of time on LingQ ingesting content, I mean, I think it doesn't take long. I don't think it takes long, in being immersed to then get to that level that you want to get to.
There's a difference in the immersion that you get from reading a whole bunch of books and watching a whole bunch of series from being in the country.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give an example. Our social media manager, she is quite good at Spanish. She tested very high on our vocab test. She's used LingQ in the past. And she devours books, but she's never been to a Spanish speaking country the past couple of years that she studied Spanish. And I said, Bree, do you know the word for coffee pot in Spanish? And she's like, no. But she knew the word for the words naufrago. It's like castaway. Like she knew the word. She knows all of these words like castaway, and like she can talk about swords and sorcery, but she didn't know the word for coffee pot because it just didn't come up in her. But when I lived in Mexico, I constantly talked about the coffee pot. Like it was like a daily thing for me. So there's sometimes a disconnect between the sort of exposure that you get living in the country versus just consuming media. I think at the end of the day.
No question. Yeah. No question. That's it. But if she went to Mexico for a month, her Spanish would massively improve.
Oh yeah, I would fill a lot of gaps.
She now has. She may even find someone to talk about shipwrecks with.
She may. Mark, before we go, is there anything that you didn't get to talk about that you want to mention, or any words of wisdom, parting advice?
I don't think there's anything that leaps to mind. I think definitely want to thank you for your enthusiasm for LingQ and the fact that you're at Refold, that you're a believer and sharing, helping spread the word, and I guess the point you made earlier, which is that LingQ is we think, it's platform agnostic. It's there. It's people should be using it. It's just a great accompaniment to whatever else you're doing. Fundamentally, it's a tool that just helps make language learning more efficient. And so that, yeah, I guess that's all I would say there.
All right. And Mark, thank you for coming on.
You're very welcome.
I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Refold podcast. If you're watching the live premiere, you're in luck. Right as it ends, we have an after party over on the Refold Central Discord server. Come join us by using refold.link/join and chat about the episode. If you enjoyed the podcast and would like to hear more, you can find older episodes to listen to on YouTube and Spotify. Let us know what you thought about the video by liking and leaving a comment below. Do you have suggestions for upcoming visitors or requests for particular topics? Please feel free to reach out to me on Discord at GeorgePig #5413 or via email at clayton@refold.la. Thank you all for watching and or listening, and I'll see you next week.